All right. Hey, happy afternoon, everybody. So I'm Jeremiah, and we're going to have a great discussion. Just curious, how many of you guys have used Pinterest in the last week? I just want to see folks. All right. About half of the audience. That's awesome.
So the rest of you should go home and try it now, okay?
You know, I have not really been a big Pinterest user personally. I didn't have a great need to it, but we recently did a remodel of our kitchen, and boy, did I really fall into it. Just like the endless scrolls of different type of styles, and it served up some great recommendations. And we actually used those boards and we printed them out and showed it to the folks who were going to do our kitchen, and it was a very, very important tool. So I find it very useful now. So Vanja, can you tell us about your role and what are you doing at Pinterest?
So I'm the CTO, so usually down in the boiler room doing technical stuff and things like that. And I'm glad they let me out today, come here to beautiful Marin County, and spend the day listening about AI, which is one of the key things we do. But joke aside, my main responsibility is technical strategy. So across the company, including backend and data and machine learning, or now known as AI. Also, I spend a lot of time on execution, just making sure that we execute as a team and we move forward. And lastly, I think, these days hiring is really challenging. So I spend a lot of time on just team issues, including hiring, including retention, and so on. So that's basically kind of my time.
He's very modest. He has an amazing background at Google Research, IBM Research, Yahoo Research.
So I am a recovering researcher. So I come from the technical side. I spend a lot of time in research organizations across the valley. And so I decided at a certain point I'm going to try something else. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're honored to have you today. So let's talk about AI. Why is this topic seemingly exploding in the last year or two?
So that's good for me because I've been around for a while and I've done a lot of AI. So there's kind of couple sub-questions here, and we can decide which one we want to answer. But one question is the word AI, where it comes and why is it so popular now? The second question would be maybe the technologies commonly referred as AI. Why are they so popular these days? So which one should we go for?
Let's do the first one, then we'll talk about nomenclature.
So yeah, the first one is about nomenclature. So, but let's do the second one then. So.
I don't know why you even asked me that question. By the way, I'm supposed to do the questions. It's all screwed up already.
In my job, I usually do the interviews, right?
All right.
So I think the technology is commonly known as AI. I think the reason why they're popular and why this conference is here and why we're all talking about it is because they're simply at the threshold when they're really starting to impact a lot of lives. Like same happened with PCs. Like PCs were stuck somewhere in offices. You never saw them at home because it didn't have any impact on people's life, directly. But once it became fast enough to do gaming and music, for example, then they kind of transitions into homes, and that became a big deal. Then everybody talked about PCs, and the whole industry kind of boomed. And I honestly think that, in my assessment, we're on the cusp of these technologies impacting lives at large. They've been impacting lives in the background in terms of advertising and some content. But now it's going to be a real stronger impact, including self-driving, which I think is imminent, and many other things that people do. Like we at Pinterest, we can, talk a little bit more later about that. But
Yep.
We have some very sophisticated technologies to detect taste and style and so on. So that's kind of the answer on
I mean, when it showed up in the kitchen through this cylindrical black device, that's when it really started. I'm sure we could even track the media mentions to see that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the first step. But the conversational technology is evolving really fast, and I think soon, my kids, they're teenagers, but they'll be telling their kids how the refrigerator didn't talk back to them. So I think that's probably the last generation when
Right.
this is going to be.
I agree. Okay, and then nomenclature. I mean, why do we settle on AI versus other terms, perhaps even machine language or deep learning or neural networks?
So I think the term goes back, some people say to 60s and before, but I think that the real use of the term was somewhere in the 90s, and that was, that's what I'm really enthusiastic now about the AI technology, but there was another wave of great enthusiasm somewhere in the early 90s, and what happened then basically, I was in undergrad, and I was working on some Prolog interpreters, which is, the whole concept is you have some basic few logic rules, and you have a lot of knowledge base, and that was the way that people thought that we will conquer the thinking, and that everything's going to be solved, and we'll donate doctors and so on. And that then didn't work out. So I was working in one lab with some Prolog interpreter, and then in the other lab, I was doing something else, which was called numerical analysis at the time. It's basically regression, right? So these guys here, they were absolutely sure that they will solve the thinking stuff, so they call themselves artificial intelligence. And the other guys, they didn't know what they're going to achieve. They were mostly worried about, variance and error and stuff like that. They called themselves numerical analysts. So, and then what happened is that the symbolic guys just couldn't really fix the problem. It just stopped. It could go up to simple problems, but the technology kind of stale. On the other side, what happened is the web revolution. At once there was like so much more data, so the numerical guys just took over, and all of the technologies you see today, what you traditionally call AI, was called numerical analysis or statistics or machine learning to a large extent. But now, because neural nets, who traditionally had connection to that community of symbolic stuff, is up, everybody calls it AI again, and I'm fine with that, right?
Okay, so we settled on that. So Matt Marshall, you chose a good name for a conference, is what Vanja is telling you. All right, so let's actually talk about Pinterest now.
Sure.
What is Pinterest? You have a specific way of looking at it, and what is it not?
So Pinterest is a visual discovery engine. So you go in there, you find what you want to do, you find what you love and you want to do in your real life. That's where we differentiate ourselves from other platforms out there. So I know we're usually bundled in the social networking kind of area, but we don't see ourselves as a social networking company.
Why?
The goal for us internally and our stated mission is to make sure we get people to do stuff outside of the online world. So we want people to cook. We want people to do DIY projects. We want people to find stuff to wear. We don't want people to spend time on our platform at length. Although, that's something we measure and obviously we care about as well at some level, but that's not our primary goal.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but that's a massive departure from the criticism we're hearing about in the technology space, right? Like time on site and mouths and trying to keep people addicted, which is creating some significant issues. So I'm on board with that mission. That makes a lot of sense.
Oh, that's great. Makes me feel good. So
Right.
I like that.
That's good.
But we've been actually trying to do this for a while now. It's not something that we invented just as a response to this reaction of the social network, of people to social network. This has been our goal. This has been the goal of our founders, basically, from the very beginning, is to actually give ideas to people to do stuff.
I like it. Let's talk about data, which is so if AI is a living creature, we have to feed it, right? How much data is there at Pinterest, and what type of data?
So I think we are the Pinterest at some level is the data we have, and we're a company that it's a truly big data company. A lot of other companies kind of describe themselves as a big data company, but our scale is just tremendous. We have about 100 billion pins in the system, and that number is really hard to comprehend sometimes, because our brains are not made to comprehend such a big numbers. And I think last time we reported 200 million users on the platform every month, and that was, I think, Q3 last year. We haven't reported a number since then. So when you look at Pinterest and each of these pins is basically an image and a text. And then on the top of that, people organize, they curate this content into boards, which we call boards. We have 3 billion plus boards, I think the last number we reported. And those boards reflect a very fine refinement of people's tastes. So we have 3 billion descriptions of things that people like together. And if you look at this data, it's actually very interesting. You find the same pin in a board about modern kitchen or about blue kitchens or about fireplaces. So when you have a pin in the ecosystem, we capture all these different aspects of it, which reflects both the visual and the textual and the real world kind of meaning of this pin. So that's why the data is very interesting. And I think the curation aspect is really, really unique to us.
And there's also all kinds of other metadata, geographic info, demographic information, when did they upload it, what order did they upload it, so you can decipher a lot from that as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some of it is implied and some of it is explicitly declared by users. But the other thing we try to do is we really try to do, to reason on the level of pins and less on the level of demographic data, because we think, that could lead to.
Has there been any surprising insights found from data analysis? Like if somebody would randomly choose this, it could result in a very odd interest in the future?
I see. So we need another beer diaper kind of example, right? I mean, I cannot think of any right now. I think, you can model data in two ways. You can think about labels and relationship between labels in exploration. And that's kind of the labeled machine learning space. But you can also think of things that do not have a label, but they automatically clump together in terms of unsupervised learning. And I think we apply both. But I wouldn't be able to tell you something surprising. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the engine and everything that's within it. You mentioned there's three types of engines: pins, the graph, which I assume is social graph, right?
Yeah.
And personalization.
No, so right. So the data we collect in our three surfaces, we have three surfaces. We have search surface, which is driven by queries. We have home feed surface, which is personalized. And we have a related pin surface where we give one pin, we get some more pins.
That's what you referred to as the graph.
The graph is actually the board data.
Okay.
That means the users organize the pins into boards, and you have this board, pin, user, tripartite graph, which I just mentioned. It has like millions and millions of nodes. And as I said, each of these nodes, they have an image, and they have text. So you have this kind of trifecta of data that most of our surfaces are powered by combination of this.
I mean, but these are all in their core recommendation engines, regardless of the use cases.
Yeah.
Okay.
So every surface, I mean, in different surface, you use the data in a different way. In some surfaces, you have an immediate context. Like in search, when you give a query, that's very, very strong signal. Like the major search engines that I know of, personalization is such a weak signal on the top of it, because the signal in the query is so strong that even some of the smartest people in the world had hard time to add meaningful improvements using past history, for example, or other data that people use, unless it's location, for example, or something very clear. But in Pinterest, we use this across different surfaces. We built a technical strategy for machine learning for the whole company, actually. We're going to publish it in a week or two. But we also built a technical strategy for machine learning, right? And in this technical strategy, we outline how we're going to organize the team, which is a fairly small team, between sharing and having specific things for each individual surface. The technical strategy for machine learning basically has two parts. It has a part for visual and has a part for everything else. Because visual AI or ML is where things are changing these days at such a rapid pace that requires different technology and different solutions. But the rest of it, the rest of the use cases, and somebody asked today if there is a part of the company where we don't use AI. There are none, I think, and there's tens of different use cases that usually have to do with response prediction. Like, we serve this, how will the user react? We have a different strategy for that part, because the nature of things are different, and because there is a 20 years body of work out there that describes how these things are done.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. I want to talk about some challenges in the AI industry, and you may not want to reflect on Pinterest itself, but maybe give a broader topic. Obviously, privacy is one that comes up. What are your thoughts around how this industry can make sure we get rid of these criticisms or be a little bit more ethical? What advice do you give to the industry?
I mean, at some level, if I can summarize AI in like one sentence, or maybe, yeah, two short ones, is you will do as others similar to, you will do what others similar to you do, and you will do what others did before, and you will do as others similar to you will do. So basically, you have people responding to something, we find some similarity to those people, and then we know that you're probably going to do something similar,
Right.
or we don't have responses, and we still get you to somebody who is similar to that, and then we use it to predict something completely different. So the problem with this method, these methods will probably like 90%, even deep networks or whatever, these principles apply there as well. The problem is that it inherently relies on bias. I mean, the ability of prediction is the ability to detect bias in some ways. So it's really hard, for example, if we want to talk about bias.
Right, that's my next question.
You know, how are you going to take that out? Or it's really hard if you want to do privacy, because the privacy would assume that you don't use the similarity to a larger group to predict, which is inherent in how this thing works. Any technology you want, from logistic regression to the newest things that are coming out there, they work on this basis. So how do you resolve this problem, right? So I think on privacy, I don't know that we have found, just putting my technical hat, I don't know if there is a technical solution for it. I think there is more of data handling solution. There's more of hygiene in the company of how we use stuff, and also understanding what kind of things will be, you know, and as a company, having a clear policy of what do we want to do with users' data and what we don't want to do with the user data. So that's on privacy. On the bias side,
Right.
It's a hard problem, and it's related to what I just mentioned before, because, you know, biases are detected, and then even if you take some bias dimension out of your model, the problem is that so many other parameters are correlated to the bias feature that it's really hard to cleanse your model, your parameters from you know, any influence that will be kind of gated on the bias parameter. But the good news is that there's some exceptional work in the last couple of years, and you know, that has come out specifically from Google Research and Etchi there. That's very interesting in a way that addresses this issue in a systematic way. It's a good science that's able to clean the model from bias. So you basically train the model, but you have one objective, which is predict what people do, and you have another objective to make sure that the bias variable doesn't influence your first objective. So
There's also a lot of discussions around what type of engineers are being hired, and are we getting diversity in that as well?
Right.
Any thoughts for the industry as a whole on that?
So diversity is something that we as a company really strongly believe in. It's also something that I personally spend a lot of time. I think, you know, as I said, hiring is very challenging. That includes diversity candidates. And I believe in a company like Pinterest, we have had great success. We're doing pretty good in that, but it requires an enormous effort and continuous thinking to be able to keep that up on that level.
Great. Thank you for addressing those challenges. Let's talk about the future. How far is AI going to go when it comes to Pinterest, right? Right now, it seems like it's doing recommendations and matching, right? But will we see it start to anticipate, or is it starting to do that? How far does this go?
Yeah, I mean, a real good product is the one that predicts what you do, but it doesn't make you feel like it's a case, right?
Exactly right.
I think, now, I think when you look at what machines do better than humans, it's a series of events that start in early 2000 and continue throughout now, and all of this are kind of pretty mathematically easy to describe things, like, you know, machines became better than, you know, to play chess better than humans. humans, and then Go, which is very, very challenging. But what I think, and related to Pinterest, what's next is that the machines might become better than humans in the things that are harder to describe to humans. Like chess, you can describe the rules of the game in 2 pages. But description of what my personal taste is or what my personal style is a lot harder. And if we look at the new visual technology, I feel that that's the type of things that machines do. I think it's going to be much harder to do interpretable models to explain why we recommend these things. But I think this type of areas is where Pinterest is putting a lot of effort, and some of other researchers. And this is areas where we're going to build something that's going to be very personable, that's going to be able to communicate with people in a way that's going to be hard for even close friends to understand people. So I think this is a vision, and I think it's a positive vision because there's a lot we can help people with if we understand certain domains. And style and fashion is just the first thing, but I believe that's an area.
So if you're going to move into more emotive ways that are more personal, ways that we can't describe to a friend, will we see other rich formats emerge, maybe AR, VR, or maybe even moving to rich media?
So we are a relatively small organization, and our investments, we invest in these areas, but they're relatively smallish. My view is that AR is gonna be the first thing that in this area that's gonna come out, just by looking at some of the other big companies and the level of investments there that they are, and I think a lot of this work that's done there is going to come out and be made available to a lot of apps through platforms. And once that happens, I think specifically for AR, you will be able to build an app in an easy way where you go around and your phone will know everything around you. And I think once that's available, the same way that machine learning got democratized like a decade ago when all this open source stuff started coming on the internet, which I think is the main force of driving AI more than the technology itself, which is how easy it became to use. And I think the same thing is going to drive AR. I'm a little bit less familiar with the VR space, so it'll be harder for me to predict what's there. It looks fun, and I wish it works. Right?
All right, so my last question, if you have kids or you know somebody with kids, and I asked this to my panel earlier that I was moderating, how are you going to prepare your kids, if you have them, for this world of AI?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to see how hard it is to build image classifier about 6 months ago. And I have 3 kids, but my daughter, she's in the middle, and she's kind of the sharpest cookie around, so I asked her to download TensorFlow and see if she can build a classifier, and she took about a week. And although she didn't understand the mathematical things behind it, she understood the correlation between crafting the features and getting better result. And so I think, and I don't think she's above average, she's above average in our family maybe, but not outside. But so I think the point here is that people are afraid of AI, and they say, only the educated will have work. I wanna take a different point of view.
Okay.
I think AI is going to be available and intuitive for almost everybody. It's like you could be a small shop owner. You will not need a specialist like me to help you to use it. Like 10 years ago, when I built an ad platform at Yahoo, I need 5 backend guys, 3 machine learning guys, and we did all the optimization ourselves. All the collections of data, everything. Now you can go online and pick it up and do it fairly quick.
I think AI will be like a service.
So, no, I think AI is going to be available in everybody's palm. It's going to be available in your phone. You say, hey, I want to predict who are my, best customers. It's going to be done. And so as long as they're entrepreneurs, the businesses will flourish even more. And as I said, I think the democratization of AI is a bigger factor in driving everything than the actual complexity of the technologies. Complexity of technologies in a very focused area, mostly in the visual areas, understanding images, videos, and so on.
So to help your kids when AI is everywhere and plentiful, what are you teaching them? This is kind of a general question, like to the future, right?
Right. So I think it's more important for my kids to be entrepreneurial and understand their environment and understand the changing forces of technology and be at forefront of how they're going to use it than to actually learn how the precise backpropagation and other stuff work in the neural networks.
Very insightful. Vanja, thank you so much. Round of applause.